Our next superb speaker is a 22-year-old farmer's daughter named Lydia Slack. And I don't know how she's going to do this, but the title of her talk is That Awkward Age. But she's 40 years too young to talk on the subject. Lydia.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Howdy.
Yes,
Just before Christmas, I saw a headline in the Farmer's Guardian. Cameron wants every schoolchild to visit a farm. And I suddenly felt quite faint and started getting flashbacks. It was spring 2001. I was still at primary school, and the National Farmers Union was introducing a similar policy to encourage farmers to invite classes of children round farms to give them a taste of farm life and where food comes from. I asked Dad which class from our school we would invite first. He said he just wanted one person at a time. Rather than giving a class of 30 a taste, we'll give one person the full brainwash. I had just the person in mind, Melissa Matthewson. Melissa was a vegetarian. 11 years old, her favourite TV programmes were Pet Rescue, Animal Hospital and Vets in Practice. Her ambition, to be a vet. She was of the opinion that all animals lived a long and trouble-free life and died peacefully of old age. She'd had little contact with sheep. As school finished on that fateful day, I walked into the school car park with Melissa. She said, "There's a tramp next to an old banger waving at you." It was Dad. Next to our Land Rover. There were strict instructions about picking me up in that Land Rover. It should be parked at least a quarter of a mile from the school gates, in a camouflage location, and preferably downwind. We jumped into the Land Rover and headed straight for home. I immediately took Melissa into the lambing shed. Her eyes lit up. This is farming at the sharp end. Dad was just struggling, lambing a big single ewe lamb coming backwards. A very difficult presentation. He got the lamb out and it lay lifeless in his arms. So he went into what paramedics would call emergency CPR, the technical term for sticking a piece of straw up a lamb's nose. And despite the lambing shed being full of straw, there's never a piece of straw the right size. So the next stage in CPR is to swing the lamb round very quickly by its back legs. Unfortunately, once it reached what must have been 140 RPM, it slipped out of my dad's hand. Now, I can't say whether it was the flying through the air, the impact of the lambing shed wall, or the cold water as it plunged into the water trough. But it coughed and spluttered, gave a loud blart, and got going. And as my dad passed Melissa, he said, "And that, Melissa Matthewson, is how to revive a lamb." We finished off the afternoon by having tea, with Mum's special vegetarian sausages, containing her secret ingredient, pork. Which Melissa just couldn't stop eating. And this was just one thing that happened when I was at primary school. But as you get older and you move on to high school, things start to change. And I suppose it could be called that awkward age, when your parents are between 30 and 50. They've just got over their own teenage years and are now going through their midlife crisis, just before old age sets in. This happens to coincide with me being a teenager. But to make things worse, you're not only going through your teenage years, you're going through your teenage years on a farm. Isolated from people of your own age, it can get quite lonely. In fact, the nearest person of my age lives 3/4 of a mile away, on what could be called a neighbouring farm. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to talk to her, because their Hereford bull got out and served 3 of my granddad's finest Frisian cows. 36 years ago. At primary school, living on a farm proved to make me quite popular, as all the other children were really interested and fascinated with animals. When you get to high school, your social status is soon lowered when it becomes apparent you live on a farm, as the perception is all farms smell, ruin the environment, and you yourself are classed as genetically inbred. See, the funny thing is, you think you're normal when you're at primary school. It's when you get to high school you realise you're actually quite different. When all your friends religiously follow all the latest trends and fashions, you know, you can only have the latest trends and fashions if they're stocked by your local agricultural merchant. Can be passed off as workwear, and you can set them against income tax and reclaim the VAT. You wouldn't believe the nights I prayed for dungarees and market boots to become fashionable. School holidays were memorable times, whilst my friends regard them as their free time. By some strange quirk of nature, my father manages to arrange it so that lambing time falls on the Thursday of the Easter holidays, whether that's the 3rd week in March or 2nd week in April. May half-term is first cut silage, and the summer holidays is 6 weeks of haymaking, big baling and second cut silage. My friends and most other teenagers spent their time off school going away on a foreign holiday to Spain or somewhere else exotic for 2 weeks. For me, a foreign holiday is 2 days at a farm sale. In Wales. The average teenager comes back with beautiful mementos and an all-over tan. I came back with a mower conditioner and a bull called Noddy. My friend was talking about her holiday romance, being chatted up by the local heartthrob, Carlos. Tall, dark, handsome, and romantic, who constantly told her how beautiful and glamorous she looked. At the farm sale in Wales, I was chatted up next to the burger van by Daffod. I wouldn't say tall, dark and handsome, more short, plump, and wearing a balaclava. And he only seemed interested in my body. lambing hill ewes, long arms for carving Welsh blacks, and red marks round the back of my legs where my wellies rub. Because his father told him, it's always the sign of a good worker. And that's when I joined Buxton Young Farmers. I met girls of a similar affliction. They lived on farms, their parents were at an awkward age, and they were also called inbred at school. And amazingly, not only are they now my friends, but I found out I was related to most of them. So then I was quite proud of being a teenager, living on a farm. I didn't regard myself as unfashionable, just unconventional. And I am looking for a boyfriend from a distant club, because we really do need to outcross. So by this point, I was really ready to get away from the farm and see another side of life, when a girl from the educational charity Project Trust came into my sixth form and gave us a talk all about her 12 months volunteering in Peru. And I thought, Peru? That sounds about far enough. So I applied for a gap year with Project Trust, which first meant attending a week selection course on the Hebridean Isle of Coll. For me, getting to Coll was a 9.5-hour train journey, changing trains at Manchester, Preston and Glasgow, stopping in Oban overnight with other potential volunteers and getting a 5-hour ferry the next morning. I was only 17 at the time, so it was very daunting, but I was really looking forward to my first week away from the farm. When we arrived on Coll, it was cold, wet, no mobile phone signal, but lots of sheep. For everybody, it was a totally new cultural experience. For me, it was just like home. We went on to do some character building tasks like climb hills, dig holes. We wrote an essay on current affairs, had to present a lesson and teach a lesson. And we got to know all about Project Trust and the projects and countries we could go to. And they got to know about us. It was a really challenging week, but when I got home, I said, Mum, that's the best holiday I've ever had. 2 weeks later, I got a letter through the post saying I'd been selected for a 12-month teaching project in Swaziland in Southern Africa. And it was time to start fundraising. £4,850. Or as my dad puts it, 2.5 cows. I fundraised some money, went back up to Coll for training and then went to Swaziland. So Swaziland is a small country, about the size of Wales, has a population of roughly 1 million people. It's the last remaining absolute monarchy, with King Mswati III as leader. He has 13 wives, 43 children, and a $30 million private jet, in a country where about 80% live below $1 a day. And Swaziland is also known for having the highest rate of HIV and AIDS prevalence in the world, which leaves a lot of orphans and vulnerable children. So that's what I was doing. I was teaching in a school with about 40 children, and I was also coaching netball and teaching piano. But I've always been the type of person to say yes. So when somebody said, Lydia, do you want to play netball with us? I said yes. But this was no ordinary netball team. This was the Manzini Thunderbirds. And although I did consider myself quite good at netball, having always been picked for my high school team, I never mentioned it, as I didn't want the weight of expectation on my shoulders. I was really looking forward to my first game when this appeared in the Swazi Times, Swaziland's national newspaper. Oh, not that one. Thunderbird sign, European player. This article appeared in shop windows, and the children at school kept waving copies about in class. Unbeknown to me, not only was I quite good at netball at high school, I was now quite good in the Northern Hemisphere. I turned up to the ground on the first day, looking for the changing rooms, only to find my teammates stripping off in the open air, in front of about 100 spectators. And when I say stripping off, I really mean stripping off. I looked for somewhere discreet to change, and tried to hide myself behind the only thing available, a netball post. Unfortunately, the post was too thin, and half the spectators had a copy of the Swazi Times with my picture in. I then heard a voice behind say, "Lydia, why you not show your breasts?" I turned around, and there was standing, 6'7", 22 stone of pure Swazi muscle, carrying 2 netballs under each arm. She was our team captain. I said, "Well, in Derbyshire, where I usually play netball, it's always very cold." 10 minutes into the game, I broke my finger and I was declared injured. But I was quite relieved, really, as I was getting a lot of attention from the locals. And I thought 6 weeks not being able to play, everything would calm down. This was the Swazi Times the next day. Sports Personality of the Week, I got injured on my debut British Netball Star. The first sentence reads, "Lydia Slack was the first female to migrate from England to Swaziland just to play netball." So I had a really, really wonderful time in Swaziland, and I learned an awful lot. But my parents back at home were always really worried about me. So after about 8 months at their Easter time, I decided to invite them out for a visit. And on the first day, I took them to the local tourist market, as it was really friendly and I was really familiar there. And I had told them that if you make eye contact with someone, you're meant to say "Sawubona," hello, or just smile, or acknowledge their presence. And they must have just forgotten, because a gentleman came up to me and he threatened me with a knife. And nothing like that had ever happened before. But it turned out he was homeless, living on the street, subject to some substance abuse, and he'd been abused and mistreated by white people before. And so in my parents' passing glance, he got really offended, and he'd been really provoked, and he came up to me swearing, and with my Siswati I managed to sort of calm him down, and told them that they're just visiting me, they're tourists. And I was really shaken up, but eventually he went away. Nothing like that happened before. I'd gone as white as a sheet. My mum put her arm around me and said, "Thank goodness we were here." The only time I really said no was when I was asked this question. "Sawubona, nifuna good sisasade," which means hello, will you marry me? A question I was asked 187 times throughout the year. Not that I was keeping count. In fact, me and my friend were having a competition to see what was the highest offer we could get for our hand in marriage. Because in Swaziland, when you're proposed to, an offer of what the Swazis call lobola is made to your family. The highest offer I got was 43 cows. Now, my dad's a dairy farmer, and he says, if he'd have known, he would have taken that. And I'd still be in Swaziland now. But I came home without a boyfriend, and one of the first things I did was attend the annual sheep sale at Bakewell Market. And there he was, across the sale ring, Albert Grimshaw. I hadn't seen him since primary school. Then, his hair was a mess, his appearance dishevelled, and his demeanour was awkward. Now, he was the same, only bigger. As the next pen of Swaledale sheep entered the sale ring, I caught Albert looking at me. Our eyes met, and I felt an instant connection. He smiled at me, I smiled back. He winked at me, I winked back. He waved at me, I waved back, and accidentally bought 20 Swaledale. And I never saw him again. So now I'm currently in my final year of a degree at the Royal Agricultural University in Cirencester, studying international food and agribusiness. And one thing we always get asked is how agriculture can be improved. And it's all about education. So I'm going to tell you my family's 3 favourite stories just to demonstrate how important education is. So the 3 types of people we need to educate. The first is school children. And it's really inner city children because they have no idea what happens on a farm or where food comes from. So to combat this issue, a couple of years ago, my dad invited another class of children round our farm one lambing time. He was just lambing a big single ewe lamb coming backwards, a very difficult presentation. He wasn't making much headway. He was distressed, the ewe was distressed, and it was all getting very messy. It proved too much for the teachers and children, and they drifted away, with the exception of 2 7-year-old girls who stayed till the bitter end. After 15 minutes, he dragged this lamb out backwards, and it lay lifeless in his arms. So, to revive it, he did what he normally does, swing it round by its back legs very quickly, and give it a big smack on the back to shock it into life. And one girl said to the other, "That'll teach it, it'll not run up there again." The second group of people we need to educate are supermarkets, because selling our produce at cutthroat prices really doesn't do the produce any justice. And just to show how aggressive these supermarkets can be, we've had one open up in our own village. For legal reasons, I'm not allowed to tell you it's Tesco's. But a lot of the local shops have shut as a consequence, with the exception of one shop, which sells a bit of everything really, in direct competition with the supermarket. The shopkeeper had lost a lot of trade, so decided to play Tesco's at their own game and have a special offer. He started with best sirloin. He put a sign out of his shop, best sirloin, $9.99 a kilo. Tesco's came straight back with the sign, best sirloin, $9.49 a kilo. So the shopkeeper rubbed his sign out and put another one out, best sirloin, $8.99 a kilo. Tesco's came straight back with the sign, best sirloin, $8.49 a kilo. So the next morning, the last throw of the dice, the shopkeeper put a sign out of his shop, best sirloin, $6.49 a kilo. Well, this prompted a visit from the supermarket manager, who said to the shopkeeper, "Look, we're going to have to come to some arrangement on the price of this sirloin, because at these prices one of us is going to go bust." And the shopkeeper said, "Well, it'll not be me, because I don't sell beef." And the final group of people we really need to educate are the government, ministers and DEFRA, because they're introducing policies which are really quite ignorant of what the countryside desires. And just to show how ignorant some of these people can be, my dad was following a flock of our sheep down a narrow country lane when a gentleman pulled up in a car behind him. The gentleman got out of his car and said to my dad, "I bet I can tell you how many sheep you've got in your flock, the exact one." And the gentleman said, "There are 100 here, you'd never do it. But if you can tell me the exact one, you can have the pick of the flock." So the gentleman got back into his car, pulled out his laptop, dialed up an overhead satellite, took an image of the area, downloaded it onto his computer, scanned it, magnified it, digitally enhanced it, and scanned it for the number of sheep. He came back with the answer 1,482. He was spot on. My dad said, I don't like your methods. I think you've cheated, but I'll stick to my word and you can have the pick of the flock. So the gentleman took his pick. My dad said, if I can tell you what you do for a living, can I have it back? The gentleman said, I couldn't do anything. My dad said, I reckon you are the government's chief agricultural advisor. The gentleman said, that's remarkable, how did you know? My dad said, well, you've picked the dog. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Stephen and Carol. It's been a pleasure meeting Nan. And Frank, it's been an experience.